Good morning, everyone. It's a joy to welcome y'all to Newman Lumen on this beautiful sunny morning in the midst of daylight savings time now. We've entered the holy month of Ramadan as well. So Ramadan Mubarak to those who are observing. Thank you so much for being with us this morning for Newman Lumen. Today, we are pleased to welcome Imam Shane Atkinson, who is a frequent flyer here at Newman Lumen. He'll be sharing some spoken word with us today. When he's not singing, creating beads, prayer beads, and serving as the Associate Chaplain for Muslim Life here at Elon, Shane can be found composing American Muslim hymns. He loves to explore the intersection of Islam and Southern culture. His music has been featured in the Harvard University Pluralism Project, and hopefully you have seen the short film by PBS featuring him, Redneck Muslim. If you haven't, check it out. And please help me to welcome Imam Shane Atkinson to Newman Lumen this morning.
The redneck is in quotes. Anyone have water? That's a Ramadan joke. I got you. So I'm going to share a couple of poems from Rumi, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. You may not know this. He wasn't just a prolific author of quotes that are on refrigerator magnets. So he was a 13th century Islamic scholar, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. There's a hidden sweetness in the stomach's emptiness. We are lutes, no more, no less. If the sound box is stuffed full of anything, no music comes. But if the brain and belly are burning clean with fasting, every moment a new song comes out of the fire. The fog clears and a new energy makes you run up the steps in front of you. Be emptier and cry like reed instruments cry. Emptier. Write secrets with the reed pen. When you're full of food and drink, an ugly metal statue sits where your spirit should. When you fast, good habits gather like friends who want to help. Fasting is Solomon's ring. Don't give it to some illusion and lose your power. But even if you have, even if you've lost all will and control, they come back when you fast, like soldiers appearing out of the ground, pennants flying above them. A table descends to your tents, Jesus' table. Expect to see it when you fast. This table spread with other food, better than the broth of cabbages.
Thank you, Shane, for setting the tone for us this morning. Our speaker today is Dr. Sandy Marshall, Associate Professor of Geography. Dr. Marshall is the Faculty Director of the Global Neighborhood and an Associate Professor of Geography in the Department of History and Geography. He also teaches in the Peace and Conflict Studies and International and Global Studies programs. He teaches and researches on issues related to cultural and political geography of the Middle East and global migration. My hunch, but my hunch is that it's your hunch as well, is that Dr. Marshall takes as much care of his students and the folks in his community as he does of his research and of his academic interests. And I have no doubt that we'll hear those themes come through in his words and his story this morning. So please help me to welcome Dr. Sandy Marshall.
Thank you, Reverend Julie, and thank you, Shane, for those beautiful words from Rumi. Thank you all for being here on this absolutely gorgeous morning. I'll greet you all in the universal greeting of peace, shalom, assalamu alaikum, peace be upon all of you. For those of you who are observing Ramadan, Ramadan Mubarak, blessed Ramadan. It's truly an honor and privilege to speak with you here this morning. Though truth be told, I actually didn't want to be here, and I tried my hardest to get out of it. Don't get me wrong, I was really touched when Julie asked me to speak at Newman Lumen for the first time, but I told her I needed a few days to speak about it, to think about it, which is just a polite way to say no. And I wanted to at least do her the honor of telling her no in person, so I came a few times here to the Newman Lumen Pavilion, and it seemed like every time I came, she just left, or she wasn't here, and maybe she was hiding in her office. But I got the sense that this was going to be hard to say no to. And that's when I heard this voice of conscience in my head, and that voice was as sweet as molasses and as twangy as a front porch screen door. For some reason, my voice of conscience sounds a lot like Shane Atkinson. And that voice told me, if you're finding it hard to say no to this invitation, maybe it's because you're meant to say yes. And that's the kind of sage advice that Shane often gives me. So I started to reflect on why I didn't want to give this talk this morning, and I came up with 3 reasons. I feel like I should have a PowerPoint at this point. Thank you. Welcome to my TED Talk. The first reason was my fragile ego. Julie told me that Ustadza Shireen, that her words last Ramadan were so inspirational that perhaps I too could come up with some words of inspiration during this blessed month. So seriously, Julie, you expect me to match the brilliance of Sister Shireen and talk about setting a high bar? Second was the fear of being vulnerable. I have not been to Newman Lumen and not been moved to tears. And for the past 5 months, like many of you, it's been a difficult 5 months, and I've carefully constructed this unhealthy wall of emotional numbness around my heart. Since 2008, I've watched repeatedly and wept, usually in isolation, watching hundreds and thousands of people get killed in Gaza, and the latest devastation has just been too much to bear. The only times I've allowed myself to be truly overcome by the weight of this emotional tragedy has been in this sacred space with many of you, and I was afraid of that happening again. Third, and most of all, I just felt empty. The metaphor I kept coming back to was that my well is dry. I'm emotionally drained, as I'm sure many of you are, from watching images on the news and in my social media of whole neighborhoods being reduced to dust by American-made bombs, of wailing mothers screaming that their children were killed on empty stomachs, of grandfathers holding their limp and lifeless bodies of their granddaughters in a final embrace, of fathers collecting the remains of their children in black garbage bags, and of newborns dying alone in powerless incubators. Then each day my wife or one of my kids would come home crying because of some of the harassment or bullying they've faced. My son's best friend no longer able to play with him because my son is Muslim or Palestinian or both. My daughter being called a terrorist. My wife having to answer awkward questions at work like, why are Muslims so violent? And then it seems like we're constantly being told that the real violence is not the possible genocide in Gaza, but the word genocide. And that the real hate speech is not racial or religious persecution or prejudice that many of us face, but cries for peace and justice. In 2020, in the summer, many of my dear colleagues, friends, and students of color taught me the word gaslighting. My own white privilege had prevented me from really truly grasping the meaning of this word until now, and I'm starting to understand. So yeah, I was feeling fragile and vulnerable and empty. Then it hit me. If there's one thing that we can learn from fasting during the month of Ramadan, it is that only in emptiness can we be filled. Only in our broken fragility can we learn how truly reliant we are on others and on the Supreme Other. And only through vulnerability can we tear down emotional walls and soften our hearts, one of the key objectives of Ramadan. Before he became a prophet, Muhammad, upon whom be peace, spent many hungry days fasting and sleepless nights meditating on the Mount of Hira overlooking Mecca, feeling weak and distraught by the injustices of his society and feeling an empty yearning for inspiration. It was only in that emptiness, in that fragility, that the angel Gabriel was sent to inspire the first revelation of the Quran on the 27th night of Ramadan, known as Laylat al-Qadr, sometimes translated as the night of destiny, decree, power, or preciousness. It was only in the loving embrace of those around him, his wife Khadija, foremost among whom, along with Khadija's cousin Waraka, a Christian monk, Muhammad's young cousin Ali, and his best friend Abu Bakr, did Muhammad come to accept that he was divinely inspired and not mad or possessed. And just when he'd come to accept his prophetic mission, the revelation stopped. And Muhammad once again felt emptiness and despair. This pause in revelation came during a time of increased opposition, persecution, and rejection, even by members of his own family. And that's when a series of revelations came, including a verse that has given hope to countless believers. With every hardship comes ease. Surely, with every hardship comes ease. Now, scholars tell us that we can read this chronologically, that is, after every hardship comes a period of rest and respite. But we can also read this as meaning with every hardship, there is also ease, often coming in the form of love and support of our friends and family around us. Later, Muhammad experienced another hardship, a year-long period known as the Am al-Huzn, the year of sorrow, during which time his beloved wife Khadija passed away along with his uncle Abu Talib, his protector. So Muhammad became the target of increasingly violent attacks. It was only in the depths of despair of that year of sadness that God lifted Muhammad up to the highest heavens during his mystical night journey to the holy city of Jerusalem. Again, it's only in our emptiness that we can be filled, only in our fragility that we can be fixed, and only in our vulnerability that we can be lifted up. During Ramadan, as the poem that Shane read by Rumi suggests, we empty our stomachs of worldly excess so that our hearts can be filled with divine presence. We cleanse our tongues of vain talk and replace it with divine words. We retreat into isolated prayer in the early morning hours, only to surround ourselves with friends and family and community during the evening breakfast and night prayer. Indeed, the concept of community and companionship, or suhbah, is a central feature of Islamic theology and history. When the Muslims migrated to Yathrib, later renamed Medina, Muhammad paired all of the Meccans with Ansar, local helpers, to foster deep bonds of friendship, support, and sharing. The Prophet Muhammad is quoted as saying, "Try to have as many true friends as possible, for they are the supplies in joy and the shelters in misfortunes." More than any other place I've lived, learned, or worked, I've been blessed here at Elon with an abundance of meaningful relationships, including colleagues whom I greatly admire, students working as their teacher and mentor, multi-faith scholars in particular, as their co-advisor, co-author, and now even their neighbor in the global neighborhood. And this has truly been the greatest honor and privilege in my professional life. I'm blessed to be able to show up as my full self in this space and feel fully supported. I honestly don't know how I could have maintained any semblance of sanity were it not for the friendship and support of so many of you on campus. Even those who have a different connection to and perspective on the situation in Israel-Palestine, I feel I've become closer to you in our shared bond of grief. Finally, in a society in which we so rarely discuss masculinity outside of its toxic traits, and in a sector, higher education, full of so many, let's face it, pompous males, I've really been blessed to make so many meaningful relationships with so many truly upstanding gentlemen. Charles Irons, Peter Felton, Brian Pennington, and of course my brother from another mother, Imam Shane. In Celtic spirituality, it is said that Anam Cara, or soul friends, are friends who, when God fashioned their unique forms out of clay, he did so using the same piece of the earth. Given our complexion and where we met, I think it's safe to say that God made Shane and me out of the same red clay of the Carolinas. A similar belief is sometimes expressed, as Shane taught me, in the Islamic tradition, that when all souls were created and stood before their Creator to testify to divine unity, before being placed on this earth, the souls standing next to each other in that primordial realm found each other in this world. So during this holy month, when Muslims are called upon to soften their hearts through fasting, prayer, and charity, and called upon to mend their relationships with friends, family, and God, I pray that all of you find friends who supply you with joy and shelter you in misfortune, and that you hold them close. Thank you.
At last, you've departed and gone to the unseen. What marvelous route did you take from this world? Beating your wings and feathers, you broke free from this cage. Rising up to the sky, you attained the world of the soul. You were a prized falcon trapped. Then you heard the drummer's call and flew beyond space and time. As a lovesick nightingale, you flew among the owls. Then came the scent of the rose garden, and you flew off to meet the rose. The wine of this fleeting world caused your head to ache. And finally, you joined the tavern of eternity. Like an arrow, you sped from the bow and went straight for the bull's eye of bliss. The phantom world gave you false signs, but you turned from the illusion and journeyed to the land of truth. You are now the sun. What need have you for a crown? You have vanished from this world. What need have you to tie your robe? I've heard that you can barely see your soul, but why look at all? Yours is now the soul of souls. O heart, what a wonderful bird you are, seeking divine heights, flapping your wings. You smashed the pointed spears of your enemy, the flowers free from autumn, but not you. You are the fearless rose that grows amidst the freezing wind. Pouring down like rain of heaven, you fell upon the rooftop of this world. You ran in every direction and escaped through the drain spout. Now the words are over, and the pain they bring is gone. Now you've gone to rest in the arms of the beloved.